Hello, my name is Zhang Xinyi, and I am an undergraduate economics student from the University of Sydney, Australia. The paper I will be presenting today is titled Estimating the Effect on the Sex Ratio of the Two-Child Policy, Evidence from China. And let's start it by sharing the screen of the PowerPoint. And as the part of background of my paper today, we can start by thinking about the much talk about issue of how serious the gender imbalance is and what is the reason behind it might be. In China, since the enactment of the widely known one-child policy in 1979, the imbalance in the sex ratio of newborns has become more and more serious. And with the proportion of girls born decreasing year by year due to the preference for sons. It was not until after 2005 that this eased, with some scholars pointing out that 54% of the births of boys between 2001 and 2005 were the results of the one-child policy. And in response to this dire situation, the Chinese government enacted a two-child policy in 2015, hoping that people would give up their preference for sons when more options were available. Yet, is the truth the same as expected? The answer is no. The sex ratio of newborns in China did not drop significantly after 2015, and to this day, it remains the country with the worst sex ratio imbalance in the world. The reason for this are due to cultural and social developments. The two-child policy has exacerbated the occurrence of sex selection, with some families who had a daughter in their first child artificially manipulating it to obtain a son. In addition, traditional Chinese culture, like Confucius culture, holds that sons are the backbone of the family, while daughters largely cease to belong to their original families when they grow up and marry. And also, China's inadequate pension system is another reason why many elderly people still need the support of their sons to make ends meet. However, even within China, the degree of gender imbalance varies from region to region. In rural areas where the years of education are shorter than in urban areas, people are more likely to have a preference for sons over daughters. But we cannot conclude that the two-child policy will make people in rural areas seek more sons either. This is because even before 2015, families in rural areas were allowed to have a second child if their first child was a daughter, because sons were often seen as a more effective workforce in rural areas. And in the context of understanding China's two-child policy, the aim of my paper is to measure the change in the sex ratio of newborns in rural and urban areas of China before and after the enactment of the two-child policy. For the purpose of this thesis, the sex ratio refers to the value obtained by dividing the number of boys by the total number of children. And furthermore, I tried to identify the relationship between the perception of son preference and the change in sex ratio. The data set I used in my thesis is from the questionnaire published by the China General Social Survey in 2012 and 2018, covering over 10,000 data from 29 provinces across China. For the analysis of the data, I used data 14 as the vehicle for the study, and the data analysis method of difference in difference was used in this section, measuring the sex ratio of newborns in different regions before and after the policy was enacted. the relevant equations are as follows, where S represents gender and L represents the region to which the child belongs, T represents the age of the child, and X is the level of education of the parents. And to explore the relationship between patriarchal perceptions and changes in sex ratios, I used the number of songs parents would expect if there were no policy restrictions in the CGSS questionnaire as a quantitative proxy for the degree of patriarchy. Using linear regression analysis, we can see the following equations, where N represents the desired number of songs, L represents the region, and these two equations represent the results of the survey in 2012 and 2018, respectively. For the data results of the DID analysis, we can see that the gender ratio in urban areas exceeds that in rural areas after the enactment of the policy, regardless of whether or not the education level of the parents is controlled for. And this suggests that the enactment of the two-child policy has to some extent promoted people in urban areas to have songs. And a part of that, the sex ratio is higher than 50% in both urban and rural areas. So I believe that the two-child policy has not alleviated the gender imbalance. And for the results of the linear regression, I found that people's expectation of songs increased in rural areas after the policy. And the number of expectations for songs is greater than one in all regions, regardless of whether the policy is enacted or not, which would explain the failure to improve the gender imbalance. And in addition, to exclude other social factors from confounding the DID model results, I also conducted a placebo test, which showed that the previous DID model was robust and valid. The limitations. There may also be limitations to these studies. For example, the use of questionnaire data may not be as generalizable as census data, and the registration information on the place of residence of the population may be inaccurate from the actual. But this data covers 29 provinces across the country, and the experimental results are robust. Thus, these limitations are not troublesome. And based on the above discussion, I conclude that China's two-child policy enacted in 2015 has not been effective in reducing the gender imbalance, that the proportion of boys in urban areas will rise and exceed that in rural areas, and also that people in any area expect to have at least one son. And to address these issues, I think there may be some solutions, such as improving the pension system and improving the status of women in the workplace. And that's all I have to say in this presentation. And thanks for watching.